Yo, what's up YouTube? Today we're going to be playing some Dominion Online. Hopefully this can become a series where we get like top 20 or something, but that's pretty ambitious. Anyway, we're going to be playing a bunch of ladder games and going over them afterwards. So, it's the first one. Alright, so we take a look at this board. Looks like an engine should be possible here. Apprentice is really the only viable trashing. I guess there's also Stonemason, but that's pretty slow. We've got Native Village for the +2 actions, and we got pretty weak draw. We've only got Moat, and Slay is kind of draw, and so basically we're going to be relying on the black market for a lot of our draw. There's Fleet and Innovation, which look pretty essential, and so basically the strat will be to get draw cards from the black market, get a bunch of Native Villages, and then basically make an engine. I get a 5-2, and so that's going to be a pretty easy Apprentice Slay opening for me. I get Slay because that will allow us to top deck cards that we get in our shuffle if we draw it like on turn 3. And the opponent goes for a silver black market opening, which is I think definitely reasonable on 3-4. So I get a pretty lucky turn 3. I get to Apprentice, trash an estate, and I draw my Slay, so that means I could either play it, get the 2 horses, or I could top deck a card. I decided to go with top decking a card because I know I've got my 3 coppers, 2 estates down there, and I want to draw them and have a good turn, so I do. They respond with a luck. They get the Throne from the black market, which is quite a good card, I would say. And then they decide to pick up a supplies. So I get a really lucky draw there. I get both Archive and Band. Band can be played as a ton of different cards, so definitely very useful. Archive is really useful too, but I just decided that since Band you can play so many different cards, it's so flexible, I just decided to go for it.
$2,000 later.
So my opponent takes a little while there, but they're only able to get a black market, so I feel pretty ahead here. Anyway, this Band turns out not to be quite as helpful as I thought. It's basically a Native Village since I have too many terminals. I get that Masquerade, which is pretty nice. My opponent on this turn is going to pick up a horse and a moat. I'm going to get my Apprentice again, and I'm going to play this Slay because I've got a clean shuffle anyway. I can't exactly use something to top deck. Then, like, after an abusively long time thinking, I eventually decide that I want a Native Village because it will clear up my terminal space. So my opponent gets a pretty nice draw here from the black market. They get the Minstrel, which is definitely a good buy. But I get a really lucky turn where I basically draw my entire deck here. I'm hoping that my opponent will pass me an estate so that I can trash it with the Apprentice, which I do. And I really want to get Innovation here. I got a copper on my Native Village mat, so I decide I'm going to play the Band as Native Village just to allow me to get Innovation this turn. So anyway, I play my black market. It actually turns up some pretty tempting things. Horn and Sculptor, both very good gainers, and so I actually think about this for, quite a while. But in the end, I can't pass up Innovation, so I eventually decide to go for it. So here my opponent plays black market with 5 coin, and so they're going to get the Rebuild. I don't even notice this for the whole rest of the game. I should have been paying more attention. I think Rebuild's pretty good. It's got some neat interaction with Castle, but I'm not exactly sure that you'd really want to Rebuild. I mean, Rebuild is a strong card, but I don't know if you really want it as your strategy. So I get some interesting, I only get one interesting option really here. I could get this Cardinal, and then I could play it with Innovation. But I decide that instead I'm going to I want my turn to continue, and so I decide to play Slay, innovating the horses instead. And actually I used the Command F there to see how many black markets I had, or if I could be playing another one. Actually, my opponent has 2 black markets to my 1 at this point, except nonetheless, I think my turn still has to continue, so I use the Innovation, and my turn does continue. I get my horse and Masquerade, which is pretty nice, and I briefly consider passing a copper, but I decide not to, because, it's just too risky, too bad for your economy. And with $7 and 1 buy, I realize I need to get some more actions in my deck faster. Right now I'm just limited by the number of buys I have. I kind of want a storeroom, except for at the same time the whole point of the strategy was to get black markets and to get draw cards in the deck, and so I kind of want both of them. Then I realize there's Stonemason there. It's a little sketch taking Stonemason with storeroom and black market because that's 3 terminal actions, but eventually I just decide to go for it. I'm not entirely sure this was the best decision, except for it kind of did give me everything I need. So here my opponent gets a pretty nice draw. They start with the Minstrel and then go Moat, and they get to Throne their black market. And this is actually some really nice options. They get Experiment and Poorhouse, both of which I would have considered. Poorhouse is really good because you can play your treasures before you play your Poorhouse. There's also the Smithy here, which is what we were talking about getting good draw cards, but my opponent decides to take neither of them, instead opting for Innovation. I guess Innovation is pretty good, but they could have gotten both Innovation and that, so Anyway, it's my turn again. I'm starting to draw a deck at this point, and so I guess we'll just speed up a little bit. So at this point, I'm basically running through my deck. I got that band, and I had the native village on my native village mat, so I knew I'd be getting +3 actions from that. And so, anyway, I find myself a little short on cards, so I don't actually have very many cards, so I guess I'm still drawing my deck. At the end, I decided to pick up a native village and a moat. The native village because I need plus actions, and then the moat for a little more draw. The moat's still pretty weak draw, but I guess it'll do for now. Alright, so now that my opponent's got innovation, they can start innovating stuff, and so they actually have enough to afford the Lost City here, which is going to be pretty good for them. They're going to be able to play it, innovate it, and then continue on with their turn. They even, like, get to throw in the rebuild here, which I think, like, this kind of scared me, actually. I didn't even realize that they had gotten the rebuild, and then all of a sudden now they're gaining better victory cards. But, like, just a pro tip, like, don't ever panic when your opponent gets the first province or, like, scores first, because, like, usually you can build for longer than you think. Anyway, my opponent decides to get a sleigh, which I guess is just fine. So at this point it might seem like I'm drawing deck, but this whole engine is a little bit janky, so I have to keep careful tabs on like what I have and what I don't have, what I need more of. I think that turn where I used band and got basically 3 actions from it gave me the impression that I was having more actions than I really had. I think I still am a little short on villages at this point. I decided to innovate the Patron here just because it'll give me an action, and it'll also give me 2 coin back, so it's not really a high cost to innovate it. And so then I decide to get the storeroom to cycle through my deck, and with $6 I decided to buy gold for some more payload. So then it also looks like my opponent is building quite the engine, starting off with that minstrel again, getting the Lost City. And so they're going to actually get a witch here, much to my annoyance, and then be able to innovate it and play it, giving me a curse. I'm not too worried because I actually have quite strong trashing. I got that masquerade too. Except my opponent does ramp it up with the draw, and also I'm going to have to more aggressively trash with those curses coming in, so that's a good play by them. Fortunately, my opponent still doesn't have very much payload. Getting a storeroom for the +5, probably a little premature because I can't really use it yet. Anyway, I'm going to keep on running through my deck, though I am going to come to the harsh reality of not being able to draw everything here. I get a relic here because I figure that if the plus cards are important, then like giving the opponent -1 card must also be pretty good. So I decided to get the relic there. Not quite sure, and I really should pick up a native village here. I still definitely need the plus actions, but instead I decided to pick up a supplies because, well, I figured like the payload and supplies is basically a peddler, but I think the native village definitely would have been better there. My opponent rebuilds again and gets a province this time, and I'm starting to try to focus on my not panicking when my opponent gets the province first. I mean, even though my opponent's had on points there, I think their deck is definitely worse than mine. I started with the Apprentice. I've been getting clean since the very beginning. My opponent gets the black market here, flipping over the Recruiter. Definitely an insane card. I would have definitely gone for the Recruiter. They go with the Apprentice instead, which I guess is okay, but the Recruiter is definitely better in my opinion. So here, even though my hand is pretty good, I actually have a pretty sad turn here. I decide to Apprentice trash that curse. I draw nothing good from the black market, and then with my 4 coin, I decide to get Stonemason, overpaying for moat, native village. Definitely questionable. Maybe 2 native villages, because the Stonemason, moat, and native village basically net to be nothing if you like draw them all. Anyway, my opponent gets a pretty nice turn here, over that Storyteller, which is definitely like a super good card here, especially because my opponent has more coppers than me, you know. Except they decide to go for the pawn instead. Very interesting, I would say. Definitely that Storyteller looked really good. I don't think I would have passed it up. So my opponent continues their turn here with innovation, much to my annoyance, and then I guess they're running out of things to rebuild. So they get a province here. This actually gets me like really worried. I don't know why. And anyway, with 5 coin, they decide to get an estate and a silver, which I think is definitely a mistake. That's basically 2 junk cards. So it's my turn again here. I'm basically running through my deck at this point. I'm starting to draw my payload, my golds, and so this is looking pretty good. Right here, I decide to play my band as a native village just to give myself actions, and I really want to draw a card. I get a miracle draw here. I get to get the Silk Merchant, which allows me to draw and continue my turn. I don't decide to buy any of those cards, and I'm still kind of short on actions. Anyway, I decide to get another gold for the payload, and I should have gone for native village again, but I get a moat for the draw, and also because they've got their witch, so I guess it's not entirely bad. So my opponent flips the Cardinal here and actually gets it. I realized the Cardinal is really good in black market games actually, because if you exile your black market cards, you can't actually get them back. So basically now I'm just running through my deck. Maybe that tunnel would have been an acceptable buy there, but I decided for the Sculptor. Here I decided to take the Patrol over the Storyteller because I don't actually have all that many treasures, and I might draw my Storyteller without them. So then I decided to top deck it with my Sleigh. I get another gold because I want more payload, and I have 2 black markets so I could be using it. So my opponent here has a pretty short turn. You gotta love it when that happens. Looks like there's that King's Court, which is looking real nice, but fortunately they're not able to afford it. They get the Native Village and innovates it, except for still it's their buy phase, so their turn's over. It's my turn again. So I basically go off here, even with this lack of villages that I keep talking about. There's still innovation, which definitely helps a lot. So this turn, I managed to pull the Captain from the black market, and that definitely helps. I innovate Captain. Also picking up Poorhouse is drawn, being able to play it after my treasures. I decided to go for double Province here, and I'm not sure if that was the right call, but I think, like, I still need to green a little bit because my opponent's already ahead on points. So at this point my opponent has another slow turn, and then now it's looking pretty over. I just run through my deck. I play it a little slowly because I kind of enjoy playing a lot of action cards, and also because I want to make sure I don't mess up because my opponent still has the lead at this point. But anyway, I double again. My opponent by the penultimate province, hoping for a dud from me, except for I have a gold on my native village mat already, so I'm just going to pick that up and buy the last province, and that'll be the game. And also, I've got my fleet turn too, but, you know, I'll just kind of end that turn, and that'll really be the game this time. Alright you guys, so takeaways from that game. I think Sleighs was quite good. It gives you the flexibility of something like Watchtower, only it's cheaper, so you can get it more often. And it also has the ability to put cards in your hand, which I think definitely came in handy. Also, one thing I definitely could have done better is to keep constant tabs on my terminal density. There were a bunch of times that game where I said, I'm going to get some more native villages, because I don't actually have as many as I think I do, but then I don't. There's always something a little distracting, which I think is definitely a big risk in black market games, getting distracted by all the cool stuff, thinking that you need more and more payload. Finally, just try not to build your deck around one copy of a card. I think my opponent was just thinking they'd rebuild and win, except for they only had one rebuild first, and also like the lack of deck control made it difficult to play that rebuild a whole lot. I think in black market games it's also easy to overestimate your deck. Like there were those turns my opponent was drawing the Lost City and the couple of moats, and it was like looking like a pretty good turn, except for in black market games, since you only have one copy of each card, it's a little swingy. You have to add a little more to get reliable. Alright guys, that's all we've got for today. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Stay tuned for the Brawl Stars tournament and more Dominion videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace!